Hello and welcome to another Finale inventory demonstration video. The topic of this video is actually configuring your integration with QuickBooks Desktop. In a previous video we've already covered how to actually set up the integration. This video we're simply covering the configuration of it and how do you control where things go once you have it integrated. So I'm going to show you that we have QuickBooks Desktop. It's open. This is my company file that we're using for the demo. I'm going to minimize that and come back to Finale inventory. So where we would want to look at, number one, is of course we've covered that we already have an integration set up. So here from this add-ons and integration page, you also have these action menus where you could actually install other integrations. But when we're concerned with the actual configuration with QuickBooks Desktop, you actually click on the link. This will actually begin the integration, and this is where Finale will show you, do you have any transactions that are ready to sync? So right now there are no items to sync. If there were, such as new products, new customers, purchase orders, or invoices, they would show in a list here. Now, the other area where we go to actually configure the integration, how it's going to act, is under the Action menu once you've clicked on the integration for your QuickBooks Desktop. So this Action menu now becomes enabled, and you actually have a link here to configure the QuickBooks integration. Once we click on that link, we will see some options on what it is we can do with the actual QuickBooks link. So for QuickBooks Desktop, we can actually turn on and off a setting called Disable Customer and Vendor Contact Sync. This is an option that you can actually disable the syncing of the contact information, such as addresses, phone numbers, and email addresses inside your QuickBooks file. So in other words, this would prevent Finale from overriding any of that information in your QuickBooks company file. So you'd want to disable this if you want your QuickBooks file to remain the master of the contact information. This does not prevent Finale from actually syncing the customer name or the vendor name. It just prevents us from overriding the contact information, such as phone numbers and addresses. So you would want to turn that on and off to your liking. You can also specify a filter date. If you put a date in this field for the invoices, this controls at what date we will actually start to sync invoices. So in other words, anything before the date will not be attempted to be synced. Same thing for purchase orders. You can actually place a date in this field by which you would want to begin the synchronization of purchase orders. And there's also a way to actually convert quantities. So you can put a parameter or tell QuickBooks and Finale how to treat the quantities. It's where you would actually convert quantities, eaches in Finale, to case equivalents into QuickBooks. So you can turn that feature on and off. Then you also have some default item names down here. So we look at default QuickBooks item name for invoice discounts. So on invoices, you can set up non-inventory or non-product items to charge for on your invoices. And when you do create those are in your application settings underneath the selling tab. And if, for instance, some of those get added on the fly when you are creating an invoice, you could actually enter in a default QuickBooks item for that to hit. When we talk about QuickBooks default item, those are here in an item list here inside your QuickBooks company file. For instance, I have a freight item and a shipping item. So that's what these are for, is in the item list, not your chart of accounts. Of course, items are set up in QuickBooks to actually link charges to an account, to a chart of accounts. So as you can see, I have a freight item in QuickBooks that links to the purchases freight chart of accounts account. And the same thing here. You can see how the mapping goes. So that's what the purposes of these fields are, is to give a default place so that if you've created one, if you've created an item in Finale on an invoice or on a purchase order, and it does not exist over here in your QuickBooks, if it doesn't exist, then it's a place for those charges to hit a default item that you should already have set up over here. So in instance here, I don't really have any defaults other than these two. So you could set up a new item for kind of serve as a catch-all for those items. That would be the purpose of these fields here. And then once you get done setting these, you would just simply hit done. So that's one area of QuickBooks integration configuration. The other main area for configuring how the two interact is in your application settings. So we're going to go over here to the application settings, and we'd be mostly interested in the accounting setup. Here is where you specify how Finale is going to actually integrate with your QuickBooks company file. So for here, for instance, this is where we specify the account name. So this description must match, right here, must match a chart of accounts in your company file. So if I look, I need to make sure that in my company file there is an inventory account, and here mine is in this company file. So it has to make sure that this is spelled exactly, case sensitive and all. So I have my inventory account and it matches my designation of the inventory account in Finale. So the next one would be an accounts receivable, accounts payable. So I can make sure that those exist. So I have a accounts payable and my accounts receivable is right here, and they are spelt the same. So we're good to go, and so on. So you'd want to make sure you have an account that matches each of the items we have listed here. This becomes just a list of accounts to pick from in the drop-down boxes down here. So this is actually where you're actually telling, down here in this section in Finale, this is where you're actually telling Finale which account to use. These are like a list of accounts to choose from. So you update this list, and then they become available in these drop downs. Okay, so that's the purpose of this integration. The account IDs are really for your, I guess, information only. This is not as critical that this matches an account number in QuickBooks. If you do use account numbers in QuickBooks, you should go ahead and update this field, but it will not have an impact. It's just for descriptive purposes, but we mainly use the description field to hit the name field, the account name in your chart of accounts in your desktop. So those are the tips here. So that's what you would want to do, is make sure you choose all the appropriate accounts on how you want Finale to integrate with your company file. So these are the actual account names that you should find in your desktop company file. So if they don't match, you either need to edit the chart of accounts in QuickBooks to match it, or you simply edit the account list here to match yours in QuickBooks. And then once you edit the list here, you will then be able to choose those items from here. So if, for instance, I make a change here to this inventory and I call it inventory asset, you will see that that automatically changes the list that I can choose from. So it just updates this list. All right, but we'd also want to make sure that this account exists in our QuickBooks. If you were wanting to make that match, it would no longer match anymore. So we would need to edit this account and actually call it inventory asset and make that change. This change will actually assure us that the transactions will actually come across accurately. So that's the number 2 spot that you need to be concerned with in integrating your Finale inventory with your company file, and make sure you save your changes. The next item that you'd want to be concerned with is in the selling and purchasing tabs. These two are very similar. The changes you need to pay attention, but they're just in a little bit different spot. So in regards to purchasing, so on your purchase orders, you'll notice that we have fields down here called discounts and fees. These are any items that you may put on a purchase order to record the charges that you are incurring from your vendor that are not inventory related. So if you're not you buy products from them, but you may also record that they charge you freight or insurance or setup fees and the like. So for each one of those fees that you want to record separately and you want to account for on the purchase order, you can set up a discount or fee. So you simply type in a name. So for instance here I've typed in freight, give it a description, and it can be a fixed amount or percentage. You're not required to actually enter in an amount, so you can actually enter that in on the purchase order at the time. But what's really critical here is that this name right here, freight, exists in your company file, in your desktop company file. So you'll notice that I'm listed over here in the item list, and I have one actually marked freight. That's the critical point, is that the item exists over here in your item list. And if you're not quite sure what an item is, when you're in your company file, you can see them up under list, item list. Okay, so the items are different than your chart of accounts. You set up an item which will then map to a given chart of accounts. So if I go in here and look at this, if you've never looked at one, we can edit it, and you can just see that we simply say it's an other type of charge. We give it a name, so this is where the name must match our name right here over on our purchasing tab. Okay, and this name must match. So if I flip back over here, these two must match each other. And then here is how the account gets mapped. So charges that come in on a purchase order for freight are going to get mapped in QuickBooks by this account right here. This is where we choose the chart of accounts. So that's how that's accomplished. The same thing for shipping. So you may say, well, why is there a shipping item over here in QuickBooks? Well, just like we have these items, discounts and fees for purchase orders, you can also have the same thing on your invoices. When you sell to and you invoice for charges other than the products that you're selling, those are listed over here in discounts and fees. So this is the kind of the same, you'll notice the same kind of description here as we saw over here on the purchase order tab down here. Okay, so let's go back to the selling. So this is where you'd also want to have any names for miscellaneous charges that you're going to charge your customers for. So here is one called shipping, and we must have this same item set up in our desktop file. So as I go back over to my desktop file, I've got a shipping item, which will then link to the sales freight chart of accounts in my QuickBooks. So that's the total picture for integrating your Finale with your QuickBooks. And this is pretty much the same exactly concept for QuickBooks Online. So if you're watching this video and you're considering whether it's good for desktop or good for online, it's pretty much the exact same concept. The same exact areas are used for the configuration. Desktop Online just looks a little bit different, and it's in a different spot, but everything else is the same. So in recap, you need to make sure that you're in the accounting tabs under application settings. You need to make sure that the description here are actual chart of account names in your desktop. So remember, chart of accounts is different than your item list. We'll go to your chart of accounts, and all your relative expense accounts, asset accounts, cost of goods sold accounts, whatever they are in your company file, you need to make sure that you have a valid entry here inside Finale to match it. And then you simply make the mapping on how you want them to go across. So that's your accounting, and then the other two key areas is in your selling. So make sure any discounts and fees that you've set up are configured. And your purchasing, same thing goes there. Make sure any names you have, and that will ensure that all of your purchase orders will flow through without any errors, and your invoices will flow through without any errors. If at the time you create an invoice and you create an item on the fly, or you create one here and you have not created it in QuickBooks, it will just simply get an error on the synchronization inside Finale when we go to do the actual synchronization. And so at that point you just have to come back to this tab, either the purchasing or the selling tab, and add the and look at the item that you added that may not already exist over here, and then you would simply add a new item to match it. That would be how you would correct that. So that's a real quick summary as to what it takes to actually get your configuration set up for the actual integration to work appropriately for QuickBooks. So here we don't have any items to sync, but we'll cover that and do a demonstration on how the actual items flow from Finale into QuickBooks in another video.